All right. Hello, everybody on the internet. Welcome to our first edition of our video interview that we're doing prior to our monthly culture chat on Twitter, #CultureChat. And my name is Jamie Nutter. I'm a partner at WorkXO, and I'm here with one of my partners, Charlie Judy, also from WorkXO. And we are going to be doing an interview with Amith Nagarajan from Aptify, because I know Amith and I know they have a pretty cool culture, and that's one reason why we wanted to talk to him about it. So our topic today is related to the culture chat topic, which is connecting organizational culture to what drives organizational success. And really to start, Amith, if you could just give us the little 2-minute introduction of you and sort of your approach to culture at Aptify and sort of what you've been doing to create a cool organization there.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Jamie. So culture to me it's ultimately the foundation for everything in any organization, whether it's by design or by default. And in our world at Aptify, we talk about culture as being formed of 3 major components. The first one is purpose. So ultimately answering the question, why? Why does the organization exist at a fundamental level? And purpose isn't about profit, but it's about something much more deeply meaningful than that, and something that affects a broader group of people than just those within the organization. So for Aptify, our purpose statement is changing the world one client mission at a time, and what we mean by that is our clients are typically not-for-profit organizations, associations, membership groups, who have a very deeply meaningful mission in most cases, and our role is to help them do that better. Our role is to help them take their mission to another level, to accelerate it, to enhance it, etc. And that really resonates with our team because it means a lot more than just being successful. It means being useful. So that's our purpose layer, and the second part of our culture is what we call our core values system. And core values to us really are the shared beliefs and behaviors of every team member. We've got about 275 team members around the world. And core values to us are elements of culture that are consistent regardless of geographic culture, regional culture, and there's of course differences in elements of culture from one office to the next, but the values are these central sets of beliefs that really make us unique. They're not generic things that all organizations believe in, they're things that are really specific to who we are and how we behave. And then the final piece of culture is really understanding where we're going. From my perspective, the best description of that is the Envisioned Future as described by Jim Collins. And when you think about this, it's about giving people a direction to go towards and to align team members both over kind of the medium term and the long run towards big goals, as well as understanding kind of where you're headed in the near and medium term. So those are the 3 pieces of our culture, are the layers of the foundation of purpose, the behavioral layer of the how we behave, the values, and then ultimately where we're going, which is our vision for the future.
And so tell me a little bit more about how the values piece connects to the where we're going, because to me that's like connecting to what drives your success, and specifically as the where you're going emerges, do the values change as well? I'm sort of curious about that piece.
Sure. Well, from my perspective, the fundamental layers of the organization, there's the purpose, which should never really change. It's not about something that starts and stops. It's actually one of the reasons I am particularly against the idea of organizational mission statements, because a mission, actually by its very definition, is something that has a start, a beginning and end to it. And a purpose is immutable. It stands the test of time. It continues to be meaningful. And values are very much the same thing. Values are fundamental beliefs and agreed upon behaviors that don't change. And knowing that we'd be talking about this, I have a little slide I'll throw up on the screen for you guys just to share Aptify's core values. That'll kind of bring this to life a little bit more than me talking about it generically. So let me know if you can see what I've displayed.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, so this is a Aptify core values slide, and really what it does is it helps describe the belief system that we have here. Our core values, we have 4 core values: flexible, accountable, innovative, and responsive. And the thing about core values is, quite frankly, in most organizations that define core values, they are generic and they're ignored. And the problem is that value systems that are really easily transplantable from one company to the next, they don't really give you any meaning because everybody believes in something as generic as honesty, for example. So, would any organization at least publicly acknowledge that they don't value honesty? The answer generally is no. So the question is, what makes your culture, what makes your people unique? When we define these core values, really we weren't defining them. What we were doing is discovering them. We believe that every culture has unique core values, so most people don't go through the process of discovering their core values and then bringing them to life. So for us, our 4 core values are very deeply meaningful. They are unique. Not every organization believes in flexibility the way we believe in it. Most people wouldn't argue against being flexible, but the way we embrace it, the way we behave, the way we architect our relationships with our clients, the way we expect our team members to interact with one another, the way we build our products, all of them rely upon this core value being upheld at all times. And so when we talk about things, even in daily meetings, daily huddles we have in our culture, as well as planning meetings, we ask ourselves whether or not our core values are in alignment with the project or process that we have underway. We're constantly asking those questions, and bringing core values to life is the only way that they become useful. Otherwise, they actually become something of a joke on the boardroom wall.
Yeah, no, we see that a lot. Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, so and let me just say hi to the crowd out there. I'm also a founding partner of WorkXO, and I'm glad to be here with you guys today. I don't get one of those neat little titles at the bottom of my page like Jamie does, so one of these days we're going to figure out how to do that as well. I'm always interested in the whole, and I love everything you just said. Like you totally laid it out, and we could have a call on a number of points that you made alone. I'm always interested in how you come up with those 4 values or 6 or whatever they are. Like, what was the process that you went through to know that those were the 4 that you needed to have at the core of everything that you guys are doing?
Sure. For us, the core values we discovered them in the sense that we believed, and we believe that every organization has core values, and you just kind of need to look for them. And so we went through an exercise. We have a coach that we work with on a recurring basis. We have a coach that's helped us with actually a much broader methodology than just culture, but it includes culture. It's a methodology called the Rockefeller Habits. And the Rockefeller Habits is actually, there's a book written by an author named Vern Harnish called Scaling Up. And this is actually the 2nd edition of Rockefeller Habits, or the 2nd version of Rockefeller Habits. But Rockefeller Habits is a huge, huge culture element to it. And one of the things they talk about in culture in Rockefeller Habits is this discovery process. And Jim Collins talks about this a lot in Built to Last. But the idea basically is that you get a group of people together from different parts of the organization, and you talk about the things that matter to them, right? Like how they go about living their lives, how the organization has behaved. And for us, we came up with probably a dozen different value statements, things that we thought were meaningful. And we didn't necessarily look for, which ones got the most votes, but we looked for which ones really were the most unique, and which ones differentiated us and our culture and the way we wanted to behave the most. And so, for example, the accountability core value, we kind of debated that, and we said, hey, is that generic, right? Because I just said earlier, I don't want get in the game values or generic values like honesty or integrity. Not that those aren't important, but they're kind of assumed, and they're not unique to our culture. We debated whether or not accountability was a core value that was unique. Ultimately, we chose that it was because of the way we wanted to express it. So we say it means doing the right thing even when it's inconvenient, or it's kind of like, you do it the right thing even when people aren't watching. And then we also went on to say, hey, accountability it's kind of a social contract in all directions. It means we are accountable. I'll zoom in on this a little bit. We're accountable at all levels. So when we look at accountability, we say it's accountability 360. It's accountability to self. So we want a culture where people are first and foremost accountable to themselves. And we hire for this. We look for people who hold themselves accountable. Not that we're going to hold them accountable. They want to be held accountable in their lives and in their profession. Accountable to team means the individual is accountable to the team, but it also means the team is accountable to the person, each individual team member. And it goes on kind of expanding those concentric circles. The next one is client, and then community, and we make it clear that it's bi-directional accountability, meaning we expect, for example, our client to be as accountable to us as their partner as we are to them. And similarly, as the CEO of the company, I'm as accountable to the entry-level person who just started today in my company as they are to me. And that's a really important part of how we define accountability. That's what made it unique to us. That's why we made it a core value. And we did that. It took us probably a good several weeks to really debate this to the point where we came up with this. It just so happened that this set of core values made up a nice, neat package of an acronym of FAIR, FAIR. We actually think fairness is great as a generic core value, but it's not a core value to us. It just happens to be how we define our core values to remember them easily.
Yeah, and I like it when a value, as I think each of yours are, can be referred to in any number of contexts. Like, and you just kind of alluded to it. Whether it relates to how you're interacting within your own team, or with a client, or with the community. It needs to have really applicability across all of those boundaries, and yours clearly do.
Yeah, the other thing that I'll share with you guys is that we spend a lot of time bringing these values to life in different ways, and one of the most important things is peer-level recognition on the basis of alignment with core values. So we do a lot of different recognition within our culture. We think, human beings can never receive enough recognition or enough signs of appreciation for doing good things. And whenever we have an opportunity for recognition in any direction, at any level, for really small things and really big things, we align them with core values. So we have, for example, these cards where we'll hand out a card to someone and it'll say, here's a core value. It's called a FAIR card. And this one's for Innovate. It has the same text you saw on there, and people can write little notes. So actually, I have a note. Someone gave me one of these that said, hey, Amith, you're doing a good job with Innovative. And that was really actually awesome for me as the CEO and someone who's helped architect a lot of this culture to receive something like that. But people give these cards to each other all the time. It's a great way of saying, hey, we're expressing that the behavior you demonstrated is in alignment with a particular value. The more specific feedback is, both positive and negative, the more likely you are to either suppress or repeat the behavior. And so we believe that when we express gratitude and appreciation, recognition for core values specifically, it reinforces them.
So when you said you guys discovered this, which I really like, by the way, the idea of discovering your core values as opposed to sort of picking them, because that again leads to what you said before, which is that sort of you pick stuff that everyone already agrees on. But the other piece that we're going to talk about in the chat in a few minutes as well is like, okay, I get your core values and I can see how important they are, but what have you done to actually link those to what makes you successful as an organization? Because if those things sounded nice and made people happy but didn't drive results, I would challenge them. So what have you guys done on that?
Well, ultimately, if culture isn't driving success, then, it ultimately is not meaningful because it won't continue. The culture will die because the organization will die. So I believe a couple different measures of success are really important to look at. One is obviously, I say obviously, it's obvious to me, but it is team member growth. Are people fulfilling their long-term goals? Are they growing in their organization? Another one is obviously customer satisfaction. I don't believe you get customer satisfaction long-term unless you have strong team member growth, which is why I said team member growth first. But they're both critical. And for us, I'll give you one example, is that we're very proud of the fact that we have an upper 90 percentile retention or renewal rate. And in the CRM and ERP type industry, that's pretty uncommon. It's normal to have 80, 85, sometimes 90% renewal rates. Last year we had 100% renewal rate. The year before that it was 99%. We have between 98 and 100% year over year over year over, we've been in business 23 years now. And what's exciting about that, it's a great thing to be proud of, it's a great thing to trumpet out there in the market, but the reason we have that is because of our core values, because of two core values in particular on that chart. One is that we're extremely flexible. We work to build relationships with clients that evolve. So it's not, okay, you signed up and this was the way life was back then, but we evolved over time with the client so that they didn't need to replace us because us as an organization, our product as a solution didn't get outgrown. And two is the accountability part, because the challenge is for a software and services company, which is traditionally what Aptify has been known for the most, is providing an enterprise software application. You build a solution for a client, and then most organizations say, well, let's move on to the next one. And so how do you actually build a model where the client is valued as much 5 years after they sign up with you, right, when the quote-unquote excitement isn't there as much as a new client, and still continue to invest in that relationship? And a culture of accountability means we stand by what we said we're going to do. And it also roots back to purpose, by the way, because the funny thing about large-scale software investments is that you might put most of the money into the investment in the first couple of years, but you get most of your value 8, 10, 15 years later if you keep investing incrementally in energy and dollars into it. But without accountability in the relationship, it doesn't happen. You end up getting your systems replaced, and that's actually one of the reasons there's so much churn in the industry. So the success part is we have really high retention rate with our team members. We have got great stories of team members who've grown with us in amazing ways, and that's led in turn to clients basically not leaving us and being very successful with our solutions. To me, those are the things that matter the most.
Tell us a little bit, Amith, about, and you've alluded to it a little bit, but how does this framework get brought up, or how do you use it in your talent acquisition process when you're trying to identify the right people for this organization who are going to fit into that framework and continue to support it? How do you use it?
Well, core values, they have to be alive at all stages of interactions with every human being you talk to, clients included and the community included. But with team members, prospective team members in the talent acquisition process and the hiring process, you've got to have them front and center at the beginning. We advertise our positions. We talk about our core values and our culture there. We look for people that are naturally aligned with those core values. This is one of our beliefs, is that people are either aligned with your core values or they're not. And that doesn't mean they're bad people or good people. It just means they're a good fit for you or they're not. And so, for example, if you have someone who isn't as focused as a human being on innovation, that they want to drive change, they want to seek a better way, if they don't want to do that, they probably won't fit here that well. And by the way, I'm not talking about splitting the atom. I'm talking about major change or reinventing the universe. It's not about that. It's about incremental change. It's about finding a little bit better way every time. It's about being curious, being interested. And not everybody's like that. Some people are very happy with the status quo. Again, doesn't mean they're a bad person. They could be great in another organization, but here they'll fail. And so we do not hire people who we do not believe naturally align with the core values. There's different ways we test for that. For one thing, we talk to them in detail. We go through an extensive hiring process. We utilize a methodology called top grading. And top grading is ultimately a methodology that it's got a lot of different parts, but for us the most important part of it is to gain insight into the patterns of behavior of the individual that ultimately lead us to be able to get a decent sense of whether the values they have are aligned. We do a lot of profiling types of tests. So, like for example, we use DISC. We also use some values assessments with late-stage candidates. So there's a lot of things we do there. And ultimately, we hire for a scorecard. A scorecard, it's part of the top grading methodology. Our scorecard has two parts. It has outcomes and it has values. And the values part's the same for every single team member globally, regardless of their position. And then the outcomes are clear, measurable outcomes that we are looking to hire people who we believe have a high probability of being able to achieve. But to me, the outcomes are meaningless if they achieve them without being in alignment of the values. And that's why the values are equally weighted with the outcomes in the scorecard. So to answer your question, we hire for it, but then we evaluate people every quarter, not every year. But every quarter we're having what we call scorecard assessments. We don't like the term review here. And we do this assessment process where we're giving people feedback about their scorecard, including their values, every 3 months. And it's ongoing even more frequently than that. But we try to bring it alive every time we can. And ultimately, the tail end of that is people are brought into positions of greater leadership based upon alignment with values. They're recognized that way. The flip side of it is someone's a poor fit for values, and we're unable to rectify the situation ultimately because the values are misaligned for what they personally value. They're let go. We help them find a better path forward elsewhere. And again, it doesn't mean we think they're a bad performer. They could be a great performer. They just don't fit our culture. And if you're not committed to that level of discipline around your values, the values die very quickly. The classic story is you have someone in a role who's killing it in terms of their outcomes. They're producing revenue, whatever they're doing, but they're horribly aligned with your values. You keep them around, you've just basically taken a megaphone to tell the whole world you don't care about your values.
Amen.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm constantly talking to people about. I understand core values, but what I want people to get clear on is what's valued with a D, because
Sure.
that's what you're talking about is when the behavior is inconsistent. People, particularly at the CEO level, when they see you do that, they will say, see, now that proves that what's really valued is this, even though on the wall is that.
Yep.
And that consistency is hugely important.
Well, and when you mess up, you better be very clear with people that you did, and you go back to it and say, hey, we could have done a better job here. I learned this by falling on my face, and as the CEO, I do that every single day in some way, right? So if you don't have that mentality, humility is another one we thought of as a core value, and we decided that wouldn't be a core value for us because it is somewhat generic, but it's a really important part of making core values meaningful, because it means everybody has an opportunity to improve, and if you can't look at it that way, you can't get better.
So we are just about out of time. Charlie, anything to add or any last questions for Amith before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great conversation, and as always, a half hour flies by. You said something that I think is really important, and it has to do with the discipline that you put into play with your values. I think there's a tendency to feel like if they are in fact core, then they live and breathe, organically, and they don't take a lot of work. That's not true. It takes a lot of hard work to improve and to even maintain how those values show up. And I think that's a good reminder for all of us, because I just don't know that we do enough of it, and I wonder if you've got one or two things to say about that before we close up.
My analog for this would be, like personal fitness. If you start working out, and if you haven't worked out in a long time or never worked out, you'll probably start to see some improvements pretty quickly, which is nice. You'll feel better about yourself within a couple weeks. But it takes a long time to really get in an excellent shape, right? So you can start a workout routine, get better quickly, but then to make incremental improvements beyond that, you have to keep working at it, and raising the bar. But if you stop for a period of time, you quickly get out of shape. Now, you don't go back to ground zero necessarily, but you come back quite a bit. And culture is a lot like that, I think, because you can start making some important changes quickly if you're committed to it, if it's genuine. People see that, and they'll be able to, as a team, kind of get behind it if it's real, and you'll see within even a few months some significant improvements in a variety of areas that you can measure. But you have to stay with it, and you see the big gains, right? You don't get to world-class performance overnight or even over a few years. We've been actively working on our culture by design for about 7 years now. And I don't consider ourselves world-class yet. I aspire to be world-class, but I hold the bar extremely high for what I consider that to be. And I think we're on our way there. I think we're doing really well, and I think we've got a lot to improve upon. But you've got to have introspection. You've got to look at it as to not just like, what's the latest initiative you can do, but how do you get better at something that's a core process? And values are a core business process, but they're thought of as being this thing on the wall still, even if you define them well. So it's tough. I mean, we have a lot of challenges with it. It's really, really hard. But one of the things I've found, and this isn't just the case with culture, but with anything, it's if you keep repeating yourself long enough and people realize you're not going to go away, eventually they just kind of believe it. And that's kind of what happens with culture and values. Even if you have people that aren't necessarily the most excited about it, they'll buy into it over time if they see that you're for real and that you're not going away.
Cool. Well, listen, Amith, I really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us for a little bit. I think that I think your organization is cool, and I really like what you're doing with culture and values, and I think you are serving as an example for the rest of us, telling the rest of you people out there to get in shape with your culture, hit the gym a little, for God's sakes. But again, thanks for hanging out with us, and I hope you'll join us on the Twitter chat, which we're going to run to right now. Last Thursday of the month, 1 o'clock Eastern, #CultureChat, and we will see everybody next month. Thanks.
Take care, guys. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Amith.
Thank you.